I've been thinking about the fires over in Los Angeles just because it's been all over the news. So, what's interesting about it is the way it's revealed a divide between different classes in America. So, I saw this article about how middle class aspirations were lost in this fire as a mobile home park burned to the ground. So I thought, well, that's interesting. I wonder what these mobile homes were worth there, because there's a difference between a person who's got a $5 million home that's a secondary home. Actually, I take that back. A lot of the homes there are more like 50 million in some cases. In any case, very expensive homes. Many of these people have them as a secondary home. It's not even their only home. It's just one of multiple homes. And to put this in perspective, living in Montana, a lot of the people who have homes in California will come to Montana and they'll buy a summer home in Montana. And that's been so prevalent that people who've spent their whole life living in the state here now feel priced out of the state that they grew up in. And Montana is not a densely populated place. It's not the kind of a place where property value would necessarily have to be extremely high, but it is increasingly getting to a point where, I don't even know that I will wind up staying in the area, because when I look at property values, I realize I just can't afford it. I could pay $450,000 for a simple house in Montana, or I could go to a place more in the middle part of the country, the eastern part of the country, like Arkansas or the Carolinas or something, and actually buy a house for 250,000, and I would have a nicer house for half that price. So for an average person, paying $250,000 is a big deal. Paying $500,000 for a home is potentially unattainable. And for the average person, you just can't pay more than $1 million to have a place to live. That's not normal for average Americans. But in LA, there where these fires have been happening, I was looking at the mobile home park that burned down, and first of all, you have to pay $1,000 for a lot fee just to have the trailer there on the lot. And those trailers that are selling these mobile homes that burned down, they're still about $1 million on the listing. So, $1 million trailer that you're going to have to pay $1,000 or $1,200 in lot fee on top of, plus probably insurance or whatever. Well, that's not really middle class. People aren't really getting a middle class experience there. They're more well-to-do people, and now there's been this tragedy and they've lost their things. And I think it's hard for individuals who are living the average American life, just trying to make ends meet, trying to get by, thinking, maybe one day I could own a home and that would be amazing if I would be able to do that. Like for the average person, it really is hard to look at people with multi-million-dollar homes losing their property and really feel any particular sense of concern or sympathy for that. Especially considering, in my experience, people who wind up being very wealthy usually treat people they perceive as lower classes as invisible. like I feel this myself, because I think right now I'm doing better financially than I ever have in my life before. Like I'm not doing terrible, but part of how I got to where I'm doing pretty well is by really cutting back the way I live and living a very simple life. So I drive a very simple old car that has nothing special about it. I usually walk to work. I don't really have any outward symbols of living a lavish lifestyle. I just live a very simple life, and my costs of living are very low. And a lot of those things that I gave up, getting out of debt and eliminating things that are costly to maintain, like I've talked about the car a lot just because it's such a great example. I used to pay $500 a month for my car payment, another $250 a month for insurance on it. And, you know, so right there, you're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of $750 a month just to have a vehicle. And then I would pay probably another $250 a month in gas just from commuting all over the place and driving places on my days off, you know. So total car expenses after maintenance and gasoline and everything, I probably used to pay $1,000, and now I don't pay much of anything. You know, I pay like $70 a month for basic insurance coverage, and I don't even have to drive very much at all, because I can walk to work, I can walk to the store, I can walk to a restaurant, live in a small town, right? So most of the time, if I want to go somewhere, I'll just walk there because I need the exercise anyway, since I work a desk job. So, you know, my life is pretty simple. But then what I've realized is the less you try to impress people, the less you worry about trying to measure up to other people, the more you just live a simple life and you do the things that you really want to do, the things that bring you joy or whatever, the more people kind of, you know, people don't really care about that, because you're not trying to measure up to them. You're not really playing the game anymore. You're just kind of doing your thing. And, you know, people just kind of forget you exist after a while, it seems like, because if you aren't trying to chase something, if you're not trying to keep up with the Joneses, if you're not trying to draw attention to yourself in some way, people don't really want to play. They don't want to play unless they can compete. You know, they don't really care about any of the things they're doing. All they really care about is being able to, you know, say, hey, look, you know, I'm doing better than you are. I'm outpacing you. And if that's not part of the equation, then, you know, they lose interest. And that's not a bad thing. Sometimes it's great to be, I guess, the gray man, just kind of blending in, doing your thing. And nobody really puts a target on your back, because nobody really thinks about you one way or another. That being said, though, you know, why would we care about people who don't care about us when something bad happens to them? Because after all, now maybe the rich will do something just so that they can be seen doing it. They might show charity because they want to put it on a TikTok video or something to get credit for it. But people who are wealthy don't really usually care too much about the people they perceive as the lower classes. And so it's easy to not have empathy for them. But what comes to mind is this: we all are in a situation where we have something that somebody else doesn't have. I'm not rich, but I'm doing better than some people are. And so what happens when, you know, there's a homeless person there looking for a handout, and, you know, I walk by the guy because I don't want to be harassed for $5. well, maybe he would look at me and say, well, how dare you treat me like I'm invisible, right? So the point I'm getting at is we can look at people and say, well, you can afford to have a $50 million house, so you don't deserve empathy because you're just a stuck-up rich person. And that may be a valid point to some degree. I mean, it really is. It is in the sense that you can't compare people who are struggling on a daily basis just to, make ends meet with somebody who can have a $50 million secondary home. Like, there just is no comparison there. And I think a lot of people do look the other way on this because in America, we all want to be that rich person, right? So the temptation is to say, well, I'll take the side of the super rich because maybe somehow one day I can get there. Even if there's no chance of you getting there, you still would rather have that illusion of a possibility of getting there than to face the reality of that being out of reach. But ultimately, the reality is we all have things, we have blessings in our lives that other people don't have. And that could be health, it could be youth, it could be financial resources, it could be a stable job, whatever it might be. And none of us are going to want to be chased by people with pitchforks who want to hunt us down and punish us or celebrate our losses because they think that we have something that they don't. So empathy is important. Empathy is important even if people don't 100% deserve it. And this has been something talked about recently when the Luigi gentleman went and killed the CEO in New York. And a lot of people rallied behind him and said, oh, he's fighting for the little guy. Well, okay. So is that a valid point? Yeah, it's a valid point. It's a valid point that big corporations often don't do what is in the best interest of the individual people in our country. That's not an unfair point. You can totally make that point. But once you start to go down the path of saying it's good when somebody tries to do some vigilante justice, well, then at what point is it also fine for somebody to go kill you because they feel that you have something that they don't, or they feel that you are corrupt in some way? If it's okay to go kill the CEO of a healthcare company because you don't believe in what that company's done, then at what point does it also become, by extent, okay to kill people who happen to have a 401k that's invested in the stock of that company because you're getting indirectly wealthy as a result of something corrupt that company's doing? See, the point is, once you start to go down the path of saying that a certain type of people don't deserve empathy, or a certain type of people don't deserve to be held accountable by the law, and we should take our law into our own hands and then essentially play God with people's lives to make them suffer. It's only a matter of time until that comes around to bite you. If you live your life hating other people, even if those people deserve it in some way, eventually it'll come back to haunt you. So what do we make out of all of it? I guess the point of it is that there's a lot of valid points to be considered. That sometimes rich people are corrupt. sometimes they're out of touch. Sometimes there's valid points about the unfairness and inequality of class division in America. And that might be one reason why it's important to understand that we should never try to achieve a single party state where you don't have the left and the right. Because if you don't have some argument and debate about the issues, then you wind up in a situation where potentially you have an imbalance. Like, we don't want communism, we don't want socialism, but we also don't want totalitarianism. We don't want fascism. We don't want a system which prioritizes the interests of corporations and the super wealthy over the individual all the time, to where we worship whoever has the biggest pile of money. So life is filled with things which are maybe unfair, things which we probably should have conversations about through the appropriate channels. But most of that is not really within our realm of responsibility. It's not really within our capacity to affect or to change. So it comes down to, what are we going to do with the life that we have? What are we going to do? And it comes down to, you do you. You do what you want to do, what you feel you should do. And don't worry about what everyone else is doing. Don't worry about who has more money or who has less money. Don't worry about who's doing well and who's not doing well. As a matter of fact, we really don't even need to pay as much attention to all the things going on in the news as we probably do. Because in many cases, we're not really watching the news because we need to know the information. We're watching the news because we just want to be entertained by it. Somebody once said, we are entertained by our own demise. And I think that that's kind of true. We look to see what's going on in the news this week, and then we weigh in on it. But do we really need to? Not necessarily. I think it's important to focus on your own personal pursuit of interests, welfare for yourself, and ultimately service to your community being the people who you have in your life right now, every day. Those are the things which you really should be focusing on. And that's not a whole lot. The reality is, our lives are usually pretty simple when we just have to focus on what actually concerns us, and we don't have to focus on all of the things, all the noise that people are turning into issues that we supposedly need to weigh in on. Whether it be somebody says there's drones over New Jersey. Well, okay, that's fine. I don't have a personal problem with drones flying over my home, though. So I don't know, There's just all these phenomena which happen, things that suck us up into the cycle of intrigue, and then we're scrolling through Reddit, rage posting about all of this different stuff, coming up with our opinions about Trump and Elon Musk and all of the stuff that's just crazy in the news. Like, I guess now the plan is Trump wants to take over Canada, and he wants to take over Greenland, and he wants to take over Panama Canal, and different stuff, right? And you just can't tell anymore what is the difference between clickbait and something that might be substantive. But I guess it's just a good idea to cut out some of the noise, because we say, does a certain group of people deserve empathy? Or if there's fires burning in LA, why are they burning? Who's to blame? And all that stuff. Well, what would you do if it was on your doorstep? What would you do if it was your neighbor? Well, you would show empathy, right? You would care about the person who needs your help next door. That's what we would do. But when we're far removed from it, we're hundreds of miles away, and it's an abstract issue, then suddenly it becomes in vogue to throw stones. It becomes more about the meta of analyzing it at a higher level, and then being a keyboard warrior. That's more about what we want to do, instead of just focusing on taking responsibility for the lives that we've been given, and being good stewards of what we have. In the end, it's all dust to dust for all of us. We came from dust, and to dust we will return. It's important to remember that. And if it seems like it's hard to have empathy for people who don't deserve it, it's not really hard when you need empathy and you have someone else asking that question of whether you deserve it. You'd always say, well, yeah, whether I deserve it or not, I sure would like somebody to care about my existence. I would like somebody to understand that my life matters, and my feelings matter, and my concerns and worries matter, even if maybe some of the things I've done in my life aren't right, and maybe there's some things that I've thought or said that are not kind or are not coming from the right place, or maybe I got ahead through channels or paths that were not ideal. At the end of the day, we're all human. We're all in this journey together. And yeah, there's corruption in the world. Everywhere you go, you're going to find that there's corruption in the world. But through all of it, there's also the goodness in between. There's the spaces between all of the corruption and all of the shades of gray, when good people do good things, and when we have cause to believe in the better angels of our nature. I've had a book by Jimmy Carter sitting on my shelf for now quite a few years. I never read it. It's called Faith. It's about how faith impacted Jimmy Carter's life. And as we have also watched the passing of Jimmy Carter, I thought it's interesting that the man really won the game of life. And a lot of people say Jimmy Carter was probably the worst president America ever had. And that's perhaps true. I don't know. I think most people would agree Jimmy Carter was not, by any measure, the best president we ever had. If you were a pro Jimmy Carter person, maybe you would say he was a okay president. But that's probably about the best grade he's ever going to get. He's never going to be remembered as America's greatest president, whether you're a fan of him or not. But you know what else he is not going to be remembered for? He's not going to be remembered for being an evil man. He's not going to be remembered for being a person who sacrificed his integrity for the sake of personal advantage. Out of all of the presidents that are out there, for better or worse, most people, even the people who say that he was a terrible president, generally will agree that he was a good man. So, if you manage to become the president of the United States, and you manage to live to be 100 years old, and people in the end remember you as a person who tried to live by your principles and who ultimately was a good man. That's a pretty big win, in my opinion. It's actually a huge win. So maybe policy doesn't matter so much when you compare it to the power of good character. And every day we have the opportunity to choose whether we're going to be people who have good character or if we're going to get sucked up into all of the noise of the news cycle of the week. As we move into the new year and I think about all the things I want to do, I increasingly think about all the things I need to give up. All the things that take peace away from my life. All the things that seem gratuitous in the moment, but they take away precious hours, precious time that I could spend doing something that I enjoy. And increasingly, I think about all of the stuff that's out there on the internet, that's out there in the news, all of the things that get attention, but don't really build up the human spirit. I'll always take an interest in what's going on in the news. I'll always take an interest in society. It's fascinating. But increasingly, I really think I enjoy the sound of silence. I enjoy things like playing a video game or going for a walk in the neighborhood. All those simple little things that don't take away from your peace. They don't take away from your ability to see the good in life. And increasingly, I feel like the months go by so fast, the weeks go by so fast. Very soon, life will be over in the blink of an eye. And somebody said life is filled with long days and short decades. And then when you get to the end, your entire life will flash before you in the blink of an eye, and you will realize your entire life went by in a fraction of a second. So when you really put that into perspective, what really matters, you know? Class warfare about who's rich and who's poor, who deserves to live, who deserves to die, politics of nations trying to engage in their machinations to gain power and influence. No, none of those things really matter so much. I think the best position to have in life is that of a neutral observer. We should be interested in what happens in the world, but we shouldn't be so worried about changing the course of nature. And the things that really matter are usually the small things, everyday battles. When they come to us, then we should be ready to rise to the occasion. But if they don't come to us, then we should just live our lives in peace, in harmony, and treat everyone with respect in an effort to make both ourselves and them feel as comfortable as possible. There's not any reason in the world why we should be celebrating the downfall of others or trying to flex our advantages at the expense of someone else. Life is too short for all of that stuff, and when you realize that, then I guess it becomes a lot easier to just chill out and enjoy your life, because you realize that there's nothing to prove. There's nothing to prove at all, other than just enjoy today and try to make other people enjoy their day as well. Do the things that are meaningful to you and share the experience with others whenever you have the opportunity to do so. Try to find ways to network with other people who share your interests or your perspectives on life. You know, I think that's one reason I like gaming. You ever go into a GameStop store, talk to people in there? I have. And I think it's interesting. You go to a gaming convention, you go to a store where there's games being sold. Suddenly, politics doesn't really matter. Nothing really matters other than the fact we all share an interest in some kind of gaming experiences. I've always appreciated that. There's not really any divisions there. It doesn't matter if you're rich, doesn't matter if you're poor, because we're all unified by that one simple thing: a love of the game, whatever game it is that strikes our fancy. So why can't life be like that? Whether you're into one thing or another, regardless of your politics, regardless of your life perspectives, you know, we're all playing the game of life, right? So is there really any reason for us to be divided about it? I would say probably not. So all that being said, to people who are suffering, going through hard times, hopefully they will find a way through. And for all of the rest of us, hopefully we can find new ways to be a little bit more patient with each other, empathetic toward each other, and inclined to see good in every day of our lives. As always, good luck on your adventure. Till next time. Thanks so much for watching.